hiker, scuba diver, and cat dad. That's a new one. I haven't seen cat dad in somebody's bio before, so just kudos to that one.
Thank you. Hey, I'm what they call a long-time listener, first-time caller to RedPlanetLive. So thanks for having me, Ashton.
I love it. I feel like we just checked like a bucket list item right there by you saying that. We've got people that have listened that are now on the show. I'm excited to be chatting with both of you today. So thank you for joining.
Likewise.
Well, as you know, longtime listener, we start each episode with question of the day. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just an icebreaker. Just want to hear your opinion. But because it's January of 2025, and normally around this time, people are making New Year's resolutions or goals, things that they're focusing on for the year, maybe no alcohol, no sugar. So my question to you today is, for the new year, do you have any New Year's resolutions or goals for the year? Anything you're working
on? So for me, I really am hopeful that this year I get to help people explore some challenges they haven't been able to do. So I set myself a New Year's resolution that every month I would either work with some of the high schoolers or work with some friends that just have things that they've been wanting to do that they've been struggling to accomplish.
I love that. That's great. Hey, it's a resolution that's not only about yourself, but it's about others as well. That's hard to beat. Michael, can you beat that? What's your
No, I'm not going to beat it, but I think mine are kind of basic. I want to read more. A book a month is, I think, a pretty common goal. But then my other goal, I think, Tiffany can attest, I tried this last summer, but I spent a couple of years in Brownsville, Texas, which is a border town, for work, and I learned a little bit of Spanish there. I was doing some Spanish lessons every day on the station, but I'm keeping it going, and I think this is the year where I really learn a lot of Espanol.
Master the Spanish. I love it. Okay, those are lofty goals. You guys probably got me beat on the goals. I'm gonna do the same thing that almost everybody does. Focus on health. Let's work out more. Let's go to bed earlier. But Michael, I do like what you mentioned about trying to read more. I saw somebody that I follow on Instagram posted that they read 200 books last year. I was like, I don't know how that's possible. You're like reading a book every other day. If you've got 200, they've got to be audiobooks. So, hey, I would love to get to 20 books for the year. Like, transparently, when you're in school, I'm reading textbooks, not necessarily the books that I want to read. I didn't pick, they weren't my genre. So my goal for the year also, I'd like to see 20 books under the tool belt by the end of the year.
Yeah, that's impressive. That's a good goal.
200, I just don't know how that's possible. They've got to be audiobooks. There's no other way. Like, you're listening to those on the way to the car or way to work in the car while you're exercising. I don't know how you get through 200, but who am I to say how much they did? But anyways, excited. I see some others are chatting about their some of their New Year's resolutions. So kudos to you guys for putting out some goals for the year. But let's jump right into the conversation. We've got 50 minutes. I want to make sure that I get my questions in there, but I know the audience is going to have questions as well. So I'm going to try to sprinkle those in throughout. If you have a question for Tiffany or Michael, please put those in the chat and I will try to get those sprinkled in throughout the conversation. But first, just want to start at the beginning. We mentioned that you recently did an analog mission at Flashline up on Devon Island in the Arctic. So first and foremost, what inspired you to go on an analog mission up to the Arctic?
Yeah, I'll start first with that. I've never done an analog mission before. It's something that always seemed interesting. I had a colleague from work who actually had done an MDRS mission and told me about it in, I guess, 2023. And I was keeping an eye out for that. And on a whim, I applied to the opportunity for Flashline's Crew 16, and I put in for it. And then Terry's kind of Terry Trevino's kind of in charge of the station over there. And the next day, I got a ping on LinkedIn from one of my previous bosses, and he said, "This guy named Terry's reaching out to me on LinkedIn, wants to know, are you, how are you?" So that's when I knew it was a pretty quick and serious operation. And that was about in March. We went in June. So things moved very quickly after that. But yeah, I'd heard from it secondhand, and the Mars Society has. I think we'll talk about it more, but the opportunity on Devon Island and how, I guess, analogous it is to living on another planet is unique and a great way to get involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, Tiffany, what about you? What inspired you to go on this mission?
Yeah, so I learned about Flashline back when I was at the University of North Dakota, working with their analog platforms, and was just amazed at the facility and had been super interested from the start. But at the time, I mean, this was a decade ago, right? A little bit over, and I was like, at the time, I'm like, oh, I'm definitely not qualified to go and do that. And I saw the opportunity come through an email of a friend of mine. They said, hey, did you know that Flashline was sending out applications and they're looking for people to go back up this summer? And I apply, and lo and behold, the gentleman Michael was talking about, Terry Trevino, reaches out, and I had known him as an acquaintance before, and thankfully got to know T. Prime a little bit better. But it was just an epic opportunity and one I couldn't pass up. I had always been interested. I've done analogs I've done quite a few analogs, and it was one that I was like, this is just the opportunity that you have to take.
Mm-hmm. Well, two things there. First, I imagine that a lot of funny stories start when Terry Trevino reached out to me, and then XYZ from there. Secondly, you mentioned you had that internal conversation. You're like, oh, I'm not qualified for that. What would you say to those people that have the same thought, that are listening right now and said, oh, I could never do an analog mission. I'm not qualified for that. What advice would you give them, or how would you say that they could get involved? Where do they start?
I would actually say to those are the people that need to get involved. Those are the people that really, and maybe Flashline may not be for you, but there's lots of analogs out there. And as the commercial industry and spaceflight is growing and including more and more of the population, and we want to include more of the population, we need to understand what they need and what their performance will be going forward. And so really getting involved in these not only gives you a sense of, hey, I'm helping people take the next step in space exploration, as you are, but it also provides a lot of key information and data that we just can't get anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to add to that a little bit, I think that, we'll talk, I think, a little bit how remote Devon Island is, and, how it can be a dangerous place if you're not being intentional and careful and are preparing. So there's, there are skills like hiking and camping and rock climbing that maybe give you some of those, or scuba diving that give you some of those, fundamentals of being safe and checking gear and planning ahead. But also, I'd say there's opportunities to get involved that's kind of tangential to analog mission. I mean, we have something called mission support here, and to kind of go down a quick tangent, the way Mars Society kind of treats these analog missions, instead of having a mission control like what is currently being done at the ISS on Mars, the time delay is 14, 20 minutes delay. So you really can't have someone on Earth control the decisions there. So we had a mission support team that would check in with us every day for about an hour, and was kind of our system that would give us more information. They do homework for us and check in the next day. And some of those folks who were doing that are applying to join this year's missions. Some of those folks are in high school even. So I'd say if you're interested in testing the waters, like maybe you take a support role and interact with those folks during the mission or beforehand.
That's a great point. There's way to be involved. You can get your feet wet, join the mission, from, like you said, a support role, and then you can kind of see what it's like. What is the communication and the interactions like between the crew and then mission control, and say, okay, now I've seen it from this side. Now I'm ready to apply, and I want to be part of the crew that's on location. Tell us about your mission. What were some of your objectives, your responsibilities? Did you go there with a plan? Here's if we need to do X, Y, Z, or I assume you didn't just show up and like, hey, we're here to have fun and we'll see what happens. But what did that look like? What your pre-planning, and what were your objectives for when you got to Devon Island?
Yeah, I'll mention, to kind of give just a brief little history of the station. It really was uninhabited for a couple years before and after COVID. 2023 was Crew 15, where Terry and some other individuals kind of went there for the first time to really kind of explore the site, and they did some simulation missions. Our mission, Crew 16 last year, was more of going there and quickly getting the station set up, doing a couple improvements to the station, and then really jumping into the science. And so we were there on the island for 10 days. We did true simulation for about 3 days and spent a few days at the end buttoning up the station for the winter. But I was the logistics officer of the mission, and I also handled the communications. So I was responsible for helping us get to and from the island, making sure the amount of supplies we brought to and from, the payloads were within the weight limitations, and then also, being the main person to interact with mission support, creating the daily reports for our team, and then Mason and Rhett, our engineer and mission specialists, kind of took me under their wing as their third engineer for any kind of other projects that came up.
There you go. So your background in logistics and shipping and all the things I mentioned in your bio really came into play here with your role.
Oh yeah, I was like a duck in water up there. It was great.
There you go. Tiffany, what about you? Can you walk us through what your role was? What were your responsibilities?
Yeah, so I came up as the health and safety officer, which meant that all the operations and activities we were doing, I was taking a minute to assess it with some logic and to make sure, hey, is this really a safe way to do it? I also was helping to prepare for the next set of crews by collecting imagery and information that we could use to create ops products and procedures that future crews could then use. So it would help improve the fidelity of the simulation as well as improve and increase safety. Some of the stuff that I really absolutely loved getting the opportunity to do was working with Tasha, our science officer. And I think we had some pretty big objectives of assessing water purity and taking a look at the different microbial life and tiny plants that were there. We did some quantification of the radiation environment, because as you guys may or may not know, it's a little bit heavier up there. So I was lucky enough to get involved in the science. And Rhett even let me work a little bit on the ATVs, just a smidge.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Just a little.
So you guys had a couple other crew members. Do you mind just like high level giving an overview of who else was a part of your crew? What were their roles? Obviously, logistics. We've got health and safety officer. You mentioned a couple engineers and then infamous Terry Trevino. But if you don't mind, just giving us an overview of your other crew members and what were their roles.
Yeah, I'll do a few and then I'll pass it off to Tiffany. So our commander was Ilaria Cinelli. You got to look her up on LinkedIn. She's from Italy. Very, very accomplished in and outside kind of the aerospace industry. She was our commander, responsible for what were our objectives for each day. Ultimately was kind of the main focal point for interacting with the Mars Society. Terry was then our executive officer, or EXO, kind of the second in command for the team, and also kind of helped. He was kind of the person who gave me all the information on logistics. He also has some really good relationships with Nunavut and with the folks in Resolute Bay and Iqaluit, which we can talk about kind of the stepping stones and the way we get to and from Devon Island. Yeah, I think I'll take care of those two, and I'll let Tiffany take the rest.
You let me try to figure out who you missed.
No. It's Rhett, Tasha, and Mason. I'll let you go.
Oh, there you go.
I know them. Yeah.
So we had Rhett Woods and Mason Robbins, who came on as the engineers and really helped get things up and running, and when things weren't running, helped make sure that it was either parted out or fixed as much as possible. And then we had Natasha Nichols, who was our science officer, and so she helped organize and conduct and make sure all of us were doing sampling and collecting things in a good, safe protocol.
Excellent. I think we have a photo as well of some crew members. I'm going to show this one, and then maybe you can explain what we're looking at. There we go. Is this everybody, the whole crew? Yeah. Where's this photo at? Can you describe what we're looking at?
Yeah. So that is us down in Houghton Crater. So Houghton Crater is they believe it's about 33 million years old was the impact for that. And so our team was able to head down into the crater and get some overhead imagery. And so you can see Tasha kneeling there on the left-hand side, Mason behind her, and then Ela, Rhett as you go across to the right, Terry Trevino, I don't know who is that guy on the end in the yellow. Who is that guy?
I don't know. I don't know who they put on, who they bring.
Yeah. And then you can see me in my, you will see the KBR hat quite a bit throughout all pictures. KBR was my company, and they were kind enough to see the value and the opportunity in sponsoring me for this. So you'll see that hat quite a bit.
Yeah. Tell me more about that. So your company sponsored you to go on this mission. Tell us more.
Yeah, so KBR is very interested in the aerospace field as well as Antarctic and Arctic research. And so when I came to them with this proposition, they were a little surprised, but they also were really excited to have the opportunity to contribute. And so they're excited about looking at innovative solutions that include out of the box thinking. And so you can't get a better environment for that. When it comes to developing for spaceflight and potentially future commercial spaceflight, the Arctic is a fantastic environment that kind of drives innovation and out of the box thinking.
So I'm curious, is that something that you might try to pursue again in the future? If you go on another mission, like, hey, we're continuing the research here, KBR, help me out.
Yeah, I'm excited that I'm looking forward to helping the mission going forward. And I know KBR is always looking for good opportunities that they can promote the values of the company and be able to kind of extend some goodwill and growth in areas that maybe wouldn't necessarily have the funding. So I definitely am hoping to go back and chat with them a little bit and say, hey, here's the fantastic opportunity we had. Are you interested in further participation?
Yeah, let's do it again. Run it back. More to learn. Talk to me a little bit about the experience overall. So obviously up on Devon Island, you're in the Arctic and it's very isolated. Can you talk to us about that experience of being in isolation? Your travel to get there. How long did it take you once you arrived? Were you surprised by not seeing anything else other than vast landscape? What was that experience like?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about how to get there. So I mentioned we were on the island for 10 days. For us, this trip was essentially like 17 days. It took us about 3 days to get there and 3 days to get back. If you go check out a map, we all convened in Ottawa, Canada. We then, our first real hop and where we spent the first night was Iqaluit. Iqaluit. That's in the Nunavut territory in northern Canada. It's the capital of that region. And then we do a hop to Resolute Bay, which you can kind of see is a little bit to the right of your cursor there. It's so you see Devon Island up top, and then the landmass to the left of Devon Island is going to be Resolute. That last little dot there is Resolute Bay. We got stuck there a few days due to weather. Each one of these hops we're doing, it's becoming more and more remote, more desolate, less amenities. And each of these flights I mentioned up until now were taken. There is like a commercial airline that does flights to these islands once or twice a week. But this last hop from Resolute to Devon Island is done on a Twin Otter plane, kind of a charter. We're all kind of packed in the back in the cargo bay of the plane, along with our cargo, and we're landing on not even a dirt runway, but really like an inclined dirt slope that's relatively level, and we're landing there. And so over those 3 days, we got to know each other as a team, and also we started to realize this is unlike anything we've experienced before. But then, getting there the first couple of days, it's the first days you're very excited. It's a novel experience, and then you really start realizing, you're waking up every day and there's not a single sound out there. We can talk more about the wildlife we saw, but it's very small. It's birds, it's insects, it's algae. And you realize like you are hundreds of miles away from anything that anyone else here knew. And I think for the whole time we were there, and Tiffany can weigh in too, but I mean, it was fascinating. I think it was you really did feel like you were on another planet for most of the time. And for me, that felt great. I think I really got a lot out of the experience.
I love that. Tiffany, you want to share your experience?
Yeah, and I have a new appreciation for our I work over at Johnson Space Center, and so I have a new appreciation for the crew that have to wait to launch and things keep getting delayed. Weather and Resolute really dictates whether you fly or not. And so Michael talked about the 3 days we got to know each other, and it was a great time, but it was not expected to be that long of a time. So we were kind of delayed in Resolute, which is perfect because I got them all to watch The Thing, the 1950s version.
Scare everybody before they go. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, nice, scary Arctic movie. Exactly. And we could then all say "Holy Cats" the whole trip, which worked great. They may have Holy Cats memorabilia coming their way. I don't know, but so it really gave me a new appreciation, and it kind of showed me what it's going to be like for people as they're on their way to these amazing new places of exploration. I know Taylor Route, Devon Island has been explored before, and people have been there. But when you landed, and more so when the plane took off, you knew, you were like, wow, it's just us. It's just me and 6 other people on this island. And I think there was a moment on the island where we were out walking, and I can remember realizing that everything I was looking at, very few people had seen. And then all of a sudden I hear like this buzzing noise. And I'm like, oh man, I'm already losing it. And it's like day 3, right? I was like, this is a problem. And I keep looking around, and I'm looking at the other people with me because I'm like, surely somebody else is like turning their head. Yeah. And then I realize something zips by my face, and it's a bumblebee. And that moment of like little self-discovery, and I know people knew there were bumblebees in the Arctic, but I had no idea, like zero. And it just made me excited for what we were about to experience, but also for what future humans are going to experience off this planet, because it's going to be even more significant than that. They will really be the first people to see it.
It's a bit of a profound moment there. And you were really feeling like you're in simulation, you're on another planet. And like you said, seeing something that few people have seen. That's what, astronauts say when they come back from, low Earth orbit, or they're coming back from the International Space Station. They say, hey, I'm one of the few people that got to see Earth from this perspective. And it maybe changes how you view the world a little bit. So it sounds like you had one of those moments as well.
Yeah, and Ashton, I think you're hitting on why this is such a beautiful analog facility, right? Like it is what astronauts come back and say. They have those moments where they're like, oh, this is just unique. You can't get it anywhere else.
So you had some of those profound moments, like, hey, this is why I'm here. This is my purpose. I'm contributing to something bigger myself, and I'm seeing how my efforts may impact all of humanity at some level. What were some of the challenges? And everybody that's listening wants to know, like, what was the hardest part? Did you struggle? Did you have clashes? Everybody wants to know, like, okay, what's the nitty gritty? What were the things that, obviously we know what you enjoyed, but what did you not enjoy? What was hard? What was challenging about this experience that, hey, not for the faint of heart, for the next person that's going to go, you might encounter something challenging like I did, which was XYZ.
Yeah, one thing I'll have, I think, for me, I'm from Florida. I've worked in California and Texas. It was cold up there, it's the Arctic. We're there during the summer. The sun never sets, but still we're talking, if not sub-zero temperatures, it's, 33, 34 degrees Fahrenheit, not just a few Celsius. So you got to get used to that, and I think also one thing that was interesting about, that we learned is that in the 2023 mission, we hadn't properly opened all the valves on our water heater. So we got there and realized our hot water heater had busted. And so, showers were not going to happen during this mission. Right. And so, things like that, just realizing that, we learned that day 1, and just realizing this is a pretty serious thing. This is a pretty serious operation. And there are amenities that you're used to that you realize, how do you do without those? How does the rest of the team do without them? And how do you not let that affect morale? So I think that I mentioned the cold first, but I think also just realizing it's hard to simulate being in a cold environment for 10 days or not having hot water for 10 days, right? And just being able to adapt to that, keep your spirits high is really important.
Tiffany, what were some of the challenges that you've experienced besides the cold and no hot water?
Oh man, the survival and escape instructor in me wants to be like, none of it. It was great. There was no challenge. What are you talking about? But I honestly, for me, it was this. There was this shift in mentality in my own brain, and these things that I thought I was going to be able to do and get done just were much harder or slower. Not all of us had the energy of Michael, who I won't. I want to give his nickname out, but I won't. But like, it it kind of took me back to be so slow and have my performance so impacted. It's not something that I'm used to. And so I think as a team, we all noticed like you would have to celebrate your minor victories because you would have one step forward. And as Mason and Michael and Rhett used to say, our engineering team, right? One step forward, two steps back. And having that was just difficult to be like, hey, we're excited because we got this thing done and we're ready to go. And now this other thing is not working at all. So it that frustration level that kind of hits you of like, I thought we were going to get this thing done and we're just not.
Yeah, I think we're all used to like Murphy's Law, but I think in program management, I learned there's the pi rule, which is however long you think something takes, you multiply it by pi. And I think that's what we had there, right? Okay, what am I, this thing broke. I think good examples like the ATVs would constantly have some kind of mechanical issue. And the first step was realizing it was broke. And then it was trying to find the tools before Tiffany had kind of redone the inventory and the habitat. And then you start, do I have enough tools and do I have igniter fluid and do I have all the things to try to test that out? So that was one example where, an EVA could be delayed hours because we had to get our fleet running.
Yeah. Is it possible to come up with enough contingency plans that, hey, if, plan A doesn't go right, we've got, B, C, D, or, I kind of imagine it's like a Mark Watney, like, well, here's the situation and I don't have a plan for it and I just got to make it up as I go and I'm going to grow potatoes, or like, no, we prepared for these certain scenarios to happen and we were having a contingency plan that we made before we even got to Devon Island. So, what does the planning for that type of thing look like? And how do you plan for the unknown?
Yeah, I think our team, and I'll go ahead and take this real quick and Michael can add on, but I think our team did a really good job of talking contingencies and prepping for like dynamic events. So landing, we have a very short period of time when we land. How are we going to execute this? What are we going to need? Day to day, like how are we going to track our tasks and make sure we're getting these tasks done that we've talked about for months and make sure that we know what's getting done and what state they're being left in. And so I think that was really well thought out, but you always have something that you didn't think about.
Didn't plan for. Yeah.
And it was those times that, we had a very strong team and we had a pretty intellectual, we had a pretty strong analytical team. There we go. That's the word. And so we were able to kind of come together and talk it out normally over food. Yeah.
The great unifier, food always.
Oh yeah, we had some great meals up there. We had tacos, bread. Ela made fantastic pasta multiple days. I'd say that was my highlight. But yeah, we definitely came in with some missions and some goals of how we'd improve the station. And I would say that our goal each year, and we can talk more about the future missions, our ratio of planned work to unplanned work, like that should increase over time, right? The more we go to plan B, C, and D, I think we start talking about repairs and solutions that wouldn't last over the winter, or solutions that may be unsafe. And those may be things that you do at your house or in your garage, but they're things you really can't do when the absolute fastest you get back to Resolute would be 2 hours in perfect weather, right? So I think just our goal, and Tiffany and I have been in some meetings with the rest of Crew 16 and Crew 15 every month talking about what are our station objectives for next year in terms of the work we're doing. So that way when we get there, we're spending more time addressing goals instead of coming up with solutions with limited tools and time.
Yeah, I want to hear about your kind of future plan, but because I'm thinking of it, let's ask it now. You said earlier, I believe your phrase was true simulation. Can you explain what the difference between true simulation is and your bookend days that were not true simulation?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about it, and then I'll pass it out to Tiffany too. Yeah, so we were there on 10 days, and Terry put it really well. He said, I guess I'll back up. True simulation would be, you're in the station. If you go outside the station, you're in, the vacuum of the moon, or you're in the very, very low atmospheric pressure of Mars. You can't survive out there. So in true simulation, you should be wearing the suit all times. You don't go outside unless it's emergency. You're not having any kind of communications with mission support without the time delay. But Terry put it really well. He says that, with how remote this is and the situations out there, you really do feel like you're in a simulation the second you set on ground there. So I'd say those are the two differences. One goal we want to have is like some more clear rules of, what are the rules of engagement for the forward team that we're going to send next year to improve the habitat, and then what are the early sim and late sim rules of the true science mission, and then what are the rules they're doing when they're truly on a sim mission. I think MDRS is a great benchmarks for what that looks like, but for us, we kind of land on the station unsure exactly of what needs to be repaired until we get there, which really makes it more real, I think, in a certain sense.
Mm-hmm. Tiffany, anything you wanted to add to that piece about living in true simulation versus the non-true days?
No, I think Michael put it really, really well. The only little thing I would add is to concur with Terry. When you first land, this is one of the few analogs I've experienced that you really almost don't even need to be in sim to be in sim. It is hard up there. It is difficult. There are real consequences to your actions, which often is lacking from analog world. So I've been lucky to be across, I think, 5 different analogs now, and work on both sides, both in and run and support them. And so it's just a very unique, tough environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk to me a little bit about kind of the future plan. So there's been obviously 16 crews, and you're already planning for crew 17. What does the future of Flashline look like in those future missions?
Yeah, so next year's, I think, the first year in a long time we're planning to do 2 missions. So we're going to have crew 17 and crew 18. We're kind of calling crew 17 the forward mission. That's the one that I'm really excited about getting involved in. That's where we have a very engineering heavy team. We're coming in there. A lot of our payload on that Twin Otter plane is going to be dedicated to equipment and upgrades for the habitat, and we're really spending our time there, our 10 days, doing a couple things. We're really right now trying to kind of do a trade study of what's a good use of our weight and what's a good use of our time, and really what's achievable and impactful. So right now, some of the main things is power. We would mainly power the station through 2 generators, a gas-powered one and a diesel-powered one. And we would often produce more power than we need at any point in time. And then on the flip side, we'd sometimes overload that, especially when we're cooking. And so we want some way, we're thinking something like a Tesla Powerwall installation where we can gather that power up over time and distribute it out. That'll be better for, we're wasting less power and less fuel over there, because fuel is also a limited resource. Ventilation is another big one too. We really had to monitor our CO2 levels. I'll let Tiffany kind of mention also like how that was and how that affected the crew, or could affect the crew. We want to find a better ventilation system that kind of runs on its own, is more effective than what we had set up at the time. And then heat is one thing. Not only heat of the air, I mentioned the heat of the water too, but having a better system for that than something that really struggles competing with the power we have available.
Mm-hmm.
And to add on to that, I think going forward, there is hope to increase the science objectives. This is an environment that has fossils and geology that you don't find anywhere else in the world. We're looking at some nanoplastics. So a lot of people have heard of microplastics, but very few people have heard of nanoplastics, even smaller. And it was something that they had found the year before. And so we were able to collect more samples. And I think that's an area where real science can be done in these simulations and directly provide data to climate change and just impacts over time, because you go back every year.
Yeah. Can we, let's pull on that thread a little bit for those that maybe don't know. How can the testing up there reveal something about climate change or something about microplastics, nanoplastics? How would you test for it, and what made that information reveal?
Yeah, so we were collecting water samples from different areas on the island, and we will then take those back to get them assessed. In the future, it would be even better if we can have the ability to assess it. And this is one of the upgrades I think they're hoping to do, but be able to assess it in the facility. So you wouldn't even need to take the samples back, and you could provide the data. Getting an understanding of climate and weather change, they have some stations set up there. They've been working with a professor at the University of Arkansas, and I feel so bad that my brain is not remembering his name right now. And so you also have the ability to look at permafrost depth as it changes over time. And that's data that, once again, as you collect it year in, year in, year, you really start to see the changes that are occurring and can provide direct data to impact potential solutions.
One thing also, I mean, we're talking also about, some of the climate change related research, but one reason why the station was initially set up back in 2000 is Houghton Crater, right? We mentioned that earlier. It's probably the best preserved crater on Earth just because of how far north it is and also how uninhabited it is. So the geology up there is really unique. I think that we took a lot of samples of stromatolites and fossils and different rock layers that have basically been thrown up, millions of years ago and are kind of intermixed with each other. And so we have a bunch of these samples kind of around the habitat, inside the habitat, and it's definitely it's difficult regulation wise and kind of disrespectful to bring those samples back out of Devon Island. And also it's just, we're just disturbing the environment, right? Like what Tiffany said, this area is so well preserved and you see things exactly the way they've been thousands of years ago. One thing we were trying to work on, and I'm actually pretty passionate about, is being able to image those, like use 3D imaging and a rotating table and series of cameras to create a 3D model representation of these samples. So like Tiffany said, we can gather all the information we need there, and what we send back to us, what we do later after the mission, is still continuous science.
I think we have a picture, and maybe you can walk us through it. I want to make sure that I'm showing the right one. Let's see, it's going to take a second just to populate. Okay, so is this also part of the Houghton Crater, or is this a separate area? What am I looking at?
It kind of drops off back behind that wind turbine. You can almost kind of see it drops off, and then you see kind of that valley behind it. So we're really right up against the crater rim itself.
Okay, and so you're wearing suits here. So is this part of full live simulation days?
Yeah, so this was one of the simulations where we got a chance to go collect permafrost data, water sample, and test out a concept for potentially using Starlink as in the field communication for EVA teams back to home base. So it was the end of the EVA. So we're actually you can't quite see it, but the habitat is just off to the left-hand side. And we were just returning from that EVA.
Okay, and I think we've got another one here. Yeah, here we go. Who is this, and what are we looking at?
The KBR hat might give it away, but that is me, and I am collecting a water sample. So we do have to wear the nitrile gloves. So you put those either over your gloves, and then to make sure that you're isolated, so you're not contaminating the sample. You'll use isopropyl alcohol. So you do some prep work. Contamination is a big risk here. And so you do some prep work to make sure that you're not contaminating the sample, and you're also not going to contaminate where you're sampling, and collect the water sample. And then in these jars, then we will take it back, and they were able to bring them they went with us when we left, and I believe Tasha and Terry are doing that assessment on nanoplastics. I'm not 100% on that. It might be other people that are also assisting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we're gonna have to get an update from Terry later on an update on those samples. Yeah, Michael.
And I do want to give some credit to Mason, was the photographer in those. So one thing that's kind of unique with the Devon Island simulations is we always have someone on bear watch, right? Because there are polar bears in the Arctic, and
Okay.
we're so far inland that you shouldn't see a polar bear there, especially during the summer. There's no food there. But it's one of the safety procedures we have to have, right? So you don't have to worry about polar bears on Mars. So we are acting in this EVA. Tiffany and I we're being very focused on the mission and effective communication between each other. But then Mason is up on a high point, taking a photo, but quickly scouring the area. He has like a system of flares that could be used to kind of discourage a bear if needed and give us time to get into our ATVs and evacuate. But it's just another example where it's not meant to intimidate people, but just let you know, like this is a crazy experience that has so many unique facets that's nothing like anything you've ever seen before.
Any other wildlife? Potential polar bears, bumblebees, anything in between? Anything else that you saw?
There was a few. I know bugs is not the scientific term, but I did see a spider when we were hanging out on one of our EVAs that I was pretty excited about. I actually have it filmed on my phone because I pulled even though your phone didn't work, it was great for pictures, right? And so I pulled my phone out and took a film of this spider crawling across.
Yeah, and in the crater there were some birds, very, very, very few birds kind of going along the river stream. Plenty of algae. I'd say the most interesting was the flora, right? The Arctic willow, some of the Arctic poppies out there. I think one thing that Tasha educated us on was I think it was you have to remind me, Tiffany, what was the name of the moth? Do you remember? The woolly bear moth is this, it looks like a very furry caterpillar, but the thing about it, it's the Arctic, and it's just the way the Arctic is. This caterpillar, essentially, if it doesn't eat enough food during the summer, it will put itself under suspended animation, and basically its heart will stop, it will freeze itself, and then in the spring it will come back to life and continue to feed. And it can do this up to 5 winters, of where it not only hibernates but basically suspends animation. So the life we saw there was pretty to see it at first, but then as you start learning about how it adapts there, it's really, really wild.
Mm-hmm. Another lesson there in surviving against the elements. Let's see. Well, I know we have a couple questions from audience, and I don't want to ignore them because I've monopolized time with all my questions. So one of the questions that I got submitted from one of my fellow students is, how do you bond as a crew? I mean, I think the whole thing is probably bonding, but were there specific moments where you were bonding, or you mentioned around food? That's always a bonding experience. But how did you bond as a crew?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. And it's one that people spend a lot of money to research and understand. Our crew really got lucky in that we worked together to kind of get the mission planned and make sure that not only we were ready, but that we were ready to execute. And so that even virtually helped us start to get to know each other and start to work together and build the trust and processes that we would need. And then once we met and started to interact and started to do little mini trainings of, we had 3 days, like we said, so we were able to say, okay, let's go out today as if we were on an EVA and learn how to do this bear watch and what we're going to do for sampling and really practice some of what we're going to be doing on Devon Island. And so I think conducting those exercises and having to work together towards that common goal really solidified us being able to work well together.
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, we're not just putting on a show here. I mean, Tiffany and I and the crew, we talk to all the time, around holidays, not inside and outside of these meetings. I mean, we really bonded up there, and I think that that started a little bit in the pre-mission planning. I mean, the unique thing about this is the analog crew really sets up the mission in the station. But yeah, I mean, these are people that I'm going to keep in touch with forever, right? So you bond during the experience, but we continue to bond together afterwards, which is great.
I just imagine like summer camp, and you're doing the trust falls, and you're trying to guide your blindfolded team member from point A to point B. I mean, is there a little bit of that? Like, you guys are guiding each other through a difficult situation that you've never done before. So I imagine maybe there's a little bit of that. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think, me, Rhett, and Mason had some good times working on the ATV, where we're just all, we're just lifting this thing up. We're all scratching our heads. We get one running and we're jumping up and down and hooting and hollering. I mean, it was, we all had a good time on it. I think the funny thing is we did we were there for 4th of July actually. And so one thing we do on the station is we do incinerate some of our trash, especially things that are like just paper based or food that's gone bad. And so we had we called it like a 4th of July grill out, where we just turned on this incinerator and just let it run and stuff like that. So we tried to turn the basic tasks into fun things. I think it felt very much like kind of the mentality of like Mark Watney on the Martian. Like, you have to look at the challenges in that kind of paradigm, right, to have fun and get through it with the team.
I love that. It's an Arctic version of like 4th of July bonfire. A little bit of home still. I see there's another question. What was the application and selection process like? What if that's a little bit different for Flashline versus MDRS or other analog missions? What was the process like for applying and then getting selected?
So for our process, or at least for mine, I got the application, I filled it out. It had the series of expected questions, right? What are your qualifications? Why should you go? It asked for some free-form answers. And then you were contacted and conducted an interview. Now, a portion of this is that you're going to be finding funding and that sort of stuff. And so that's also part of it is, hey, what's your plan for being able to fund? Are you going to self-fund? Are you going to go and find people to help you? There's a couple of different pieces, and it follows a somewhat similar process. I think we've adapted it a little bit more this go to look a little bit at the team dynamics as well, and understand how that will play into, since we're building 2 different teams, we want to make sure that we're building teams that will be high performing. So it's similar to some of the processes you see, but it does have some strong or more inclusive factors to it.
Michael, what about you? What was your experience like applying?
Yeah, I did the same thing. Tiffany did and applied through. It was actually the Mars Society sends out these information, and I think we'll probably send out some similar information too. We've started adding some more questions. Mentioned, like Tiffany said, the funding. We want to kind of see what kind of skills you have, and then, like I said, the nice thing is we have these 2 different teams, right? This forward team and the simulation team. So there's the ability for you to be more of a specialist, I think, right? Than instead of a jack of all trades engineer or someone who can do any kind of science. So I think the right thing to do is to initially apply, state what your intents are, state what your skills are. And then really the right thing to do is have a conversation with Terry, and he may rope in people like Tiffany and I to kind of pick at certain skill sets you have. And like I said, maybe you have a good role on an immediate analog mission, or maybe we put you in these planning meetings, or maybe you serve a mission support role and really try to start building experience with us.
I've considered for myself applying for MDRS. I think I've said that the 2 years I've been hosting this podcast, and I promise I'm getting to it, James, if you're listening. But what are some of the things that I could do to prepare? I mean, I'm not an engineer and I'm not a health and safety officer. But what is something that I could do? I mean, my mind goes to first aid. I mean, I've had first aid certification years ago. Maybe I should refresh that. But what are some other skills that I could practice right now in anticipation that I may want to go on an analog mission in the future? Oh, that's a stumper.
Tiffany's on mute.
Oh, there we go. We lost audio for you for a second.
Uh-oh, am I muted again?
There we go. There we go.
Man, I think it is a tough question because there's so many different skills and different things that are needed for these types of environments. But one of the things that's really good to prepare for is kind of understanding your own boundaries and adaptability and where your stressors can be. And so taking some time and writing down, and I've told this to other folks before they go into other analog missions, and I'm like, hey, take some time and really think about, hey, what gets under my skin and how am I going to respond if it happens in this environment? Because part of being able to have a good response in these environments is prepping yourself. It's one of the reasons why we do fire drills, right? Because you think about it and you kind of do it, and then when the situation happens, it's forefront in your mind. And so you do what that comes straight into your mind rather than taking the 10-15 seconds to let either emotions or let your brain kind of wander and try to figure out, what do I need to do here? You just know, and you go and do it.
Yeah, I think, when we were doing EVAs, I was kind of thinking of like, what have I done in my life that made me feel very comfortable in these environments? And yeah, like, you mentioned like I've done logistics in my career. I have an engineering background, but really, I mean, I thought about my scuba diving. I thought about my hiking and camping. Those, like I mentioned earlier, those skills where you have gear and you have to be responsible for it, and you have to, there's some training involved on what's your, like Tiffany said, what is your limit? What are you comfortable with? And if things start to go wrong, how do you address those, or how do you back out and end kind of that excursion? Those were all really helpful. And I think those are the things that you can't do those for the first time. You can't experience those situations first time on an analog. You need to be comfortable with those as a hobby, as something that you do for fun, and you enjoy being able to feel competent, prepared in case any risk comes up. That was, I think, the thing that was, for me, made me feel most comfortable applying for this experience.
That's really good advice. I'm going to take that back, take that to heart. It's going to resonate a little bit with myself, not just like what tangible skills do I have? Can I make a fire? Can I cook? But how would I react in stressful situations? What are some of those triggers for myself, and how can I be a better teammate? So that's really good advice. Thank you. It's going to sit with me as I think about filling out that MDRS application. Well, I know we're coming up on time, so I want to make sure that I get one last really good question in. And so this was submitted ahead of time. How do you feel that serving as part of an analog crew at Flashline will benefit you professionally and benefit humanity? I'll leave you with a thinker at the end. How do you think it's going to benefit yourself and humanity?
I think Michael wanted to go first on this one.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. No, I mean, I was thinking about this. I mean, I work in inventory, I work in warehousing, and I think about what happens if things go poorly in inventory and logistics. And I think during COVID, we saw that, right, with things like toilet paper and hand sanitizer, right, which is not, not the end of the world, right? And I think, I work in aerospace, where if we have a similar shortage or stock out, I think that could stop production, that could delay a launch. But I think that if we had this issue on another planet, I think we start talking about the colony collapsing and people's lives being at risk. So I'm excited, like taking kind of this experience back, and if I can get more involved in this as a career in the future, as we continue to move towards becoming interplanetary, like this is a good background for me. This is a good stepping stone. And I think that the more that we find these little, like for me, it's warehousing, it's logistics and inventory. I think that's something that's important to figure out here. Tiffany mentioned some of the, the human factors and the team dynamics. Like we need to figure out all these things here and not figure them out on another planet for the first time. And I think as we and other analog crew members bring their skill sets to these analog missions and figure out how they'd be on another planet, that prepares us for the next leap.
Great answer.
Yeah, that was a fantastic answer, Michael. I wish I had gone first now. Oh man. No, so for me, this was a great opportunity to kind of immerse myself into a almost as close of an environment as I can get to what the crews we're training are going to experience. And so as we get closer and closer to putting boots back on the moon and looking forward to what it's going to take to put humans on Mars, it's, when you're sitting at your desk, it's really easy to write these things and be like, yeah, they're going to do it. And, they're going to be able to egress in 15 seconds and, nothing's ever going to go wrong and the ATV will be fine for them. And yeah. And so it was just a reminder to me and kind of helped place me back in that environment. So I took away a lot personally from it. And I think going forward, there is just so much, especially with this facility, there's so much applicability in the commercial world, and just in the being able for companies to reach out and say, hey, I want to test this product. I can't necessarily afford to put it on the moon, but maybe I can test it in this analog environment first. And so I'm excited to see, hopefully, some of that really start to play out.
I love both of those answers. Either your first or your second. I mean, you nailed it. I think that's gonna resonate with a lot of people and inspire them to want to be involved as well, and take a look at themselves and how can they contribute to the mission, getting humans to Mars and exploring the universe. So I that was great. 2 thumbs up from me on both of your answers. But I just want to say, thank you so much, Tiffany and Michael. Thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure to chat with both of you.
Thank you, Ashton.
Yeah, thank you much, Ashton. Really appreciate it.
Of course. And of course, we have to give thank yous to our friends at Liftport, Michael and Leah, our executive director, James Burke, PR director, Michael Stoltz. And thank you, everybody that's tuned in to today's conversation. We're first episode of 2025 down. Thank you guys for joining and for participating in the conversation. You've heard me say it before. You'll hear me say it again.